And you are watching GVTV News.
Thanks, Renette, and I'm Randy Hansen. In world news headlines today, Syrian troops launch bloody assault in third largest city. And Italy's prime minister under pressure to resign as massive economic crisis worsens. And on voting day, Ohio to decide on controversial anti-union legislation. An architect of Arizona's anti-immigration law faces recall. Mississippi voting on bill to grant embryos personhood. And Philadelphia sheriff candidate pledges to oppose foreclosures. And new census data shows a record 49 million Americans living in poverty. And over 1,000 senior citizens joined Occupy Chicago to oppose Social Security cuts. About 50 arrested. And New Yorkers march from across Manhattan to occupy Wall Street. And video shows Oakland police shooting man as he films Occupy protest. And former President Clinton expresses sympathy with Occupy movement, recommends dialogue with lawmakers. And French President said to Obama, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu is a liar. And State Department opens special review of controversial Keystone XL tar sands oil pipeline. And Australian law forces worst polluting companies to pay carbon emissions tax. And former President Carter expresses disappointment over reconstruction efforts in Haiti. And Texas grants stay of execution for death row prisoner. And Michael Jackson's doctor found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. But before these stories, GVTV News would like to thank one of our underwriters who supports your only visual video news media in Nevada County. That's right, it's us. GVTV News. In today's first world news story, Syrian troops have launched a bloody assault to retake Homs, Syria's third largest city. Less than a week after agreeing to an Arab League peace deal, Syrian government has begun waging what many say is its most violent crackdown in 8 months uprising. At least 110 people had been killed in the past 5 days in Homs. United Nations says at least 3,500 people have now been killed in Syria since the crackdown began in mid-March. Arab League has called for an emergency meeting, but it was not be held until Saturday. Kicking the bucket down the road. Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is coming under increasing pressure to resign as Italy struggles to deal with its worsening economic crisis. Earlier yesterday, one of Berlusconi's main coalition partners, Umberto Bossi of the Northern League, urged him to step aside ahead of a crucial budget vote. With the third biggest economy in Eurozone, the economic crisis facing Italy is considered to be far more dangerous than Greece. Many economists believe that Italy's borrowing costs are approaching levels that may force the nation to ask for a massive bailout, far bigger than the bailouts for Greece, Ireland, or Portugal. It is a voting day in many parts of the country. In Ohio, early polling suggests voters may be on track to defeat legislation that would ratify Republican Governor John Kasich's controversial limits on the collective bargaining rights of the state employees. Issue was placed on a ballot after a group created after Kasich's law was passed this spring gathered 1.3 million signatures to oppose the measure. The architect of Arizona's controversial anti-immigration law is fighting to defend his position in the state Senate, and amid a recall election, Russell Pierce is being challenged by fellow Republican Jerry Lewis. Pierce wrote Senate Bill 1070, which forces police to investigate immigration status of people they have lawfully detained. In Mississippi, citizens have voted on a bill that would establish that a fertilized human egg is a person. Both Republican and Democratic candidates for governor in Mississippi are in favor of the measure, which would confer rights on an embryo from the moment of conception. If passed, the measure would make Mississippi the first state ever to grant constitutional rights to an embryo. The consequence of such a move remains unclear, although many speculate it would make infertility treatments and birth control illegal, and would all but certainly lead to a ban on abortion. In Philadelphia, a longtime anti-poverty activist is running for so-called People's Sheriff. Sherry Honkala, a member of the Green Party, says if she is elected, she will oppose foreclosures and refuse to evict people out of their homes. New census data shows a record 49.1 million Americans, 16% of Americans, are now living in poverty. On Monday, the government released the new figures based on a revised formula of poverty. The new number shows that 3 million more people are living in poverty than official measure released in September. The new data shows 16% of Americans 65 or older are now living in poverty, far higher figure than previous studies have showed. Washington Post reports the biggest factor increasing the poverty rate for seniors under the new formula was out-of-pocket medical expenses. The new data shows 28% of Latinos and more than 25% of African Americans were living in poverty. Without food stamps, another 5 million would be living in poverty. Well, cost of living keeps going up, but they don't raise the Social Security benefits. Just keep everything the same. In Chicago, more than 1,000 senior citizens joined forces with Occupy Chicago on Monday to protest cuts of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. After a large march, about 50 people were arrested for blocking traffic on the street. And in New York City, hundreds of protesters marched across the island of Manhattan to the Occupy Wall Street encampment based in Lower Manhattan. New York State Senator Adriano Espaillat took part in the march and said, "The council member and I began this because our communities for over decades have been in a permanent recession. You know, we have double-digit unemployment rates. We have lack of affordable housing, health care. We have very great needs. And for many years, even in affluent times, when the economy was doing better, we were left behind. So the message has been sent to the people in Occupy Wall Street. We know very well, for decades, we know that message. And we want to show solidarity. We want to change the face of that movement to ensure that we also are part of that movement, to ensure that we pass the millionaire's tax that will bring greater resources to the state government so we don't have to do the cuts." In California, a video has been posted online showing an Oakland police officer shooting a rubber bullet or beanbag projectile directly at a person who was filming the protest on the night of the general strike. And in a recent interview with USA Today, former President Bill Clinton offered some of the thoughts on Occupy Wall Street movement, some of his thoughts. "They have an amorphous set of resentments for which I sympathize," Clinton said. "I don't think Americans can continue this level of income inequality." Clinton went on to suggest a change in the movement's strategy, however, arguing the encampment in New York City would benefit from a discussion with the political leaders such as New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Michael Bloomberg. If you say so. French President Nicolas Sarkozy was overheard last week calling Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a liar in private remarks to President Barack Obama at the G20 summit. Comments were overheard by a group of journalists. Sarkozy said that in French about Netanyahu, "I can't stand him anymore, he's a liar." President Obama responded, "You may be sick of him, but me, I have to deal with him every day." The conversation apparently began with Obama criticizing Sarkozy for voting in favor of the Palestinian UN membership bid in UNESCO, despite opposition from the United States and Israel. U.S. State Department's Inspector General has opened a special review of department's handling of permitting for the 1,700-mile Canada to Texas Keystone XL tar sands oil pipeline, which could delay the final decision on the line until after the 2012 election. Opponents of the pipeline have expressed concern that the State Department hired to conduct environmental impact statements on the pipeline had financial ties to TransCanada. The Inspector General's announcement came a day after some 10,000 pipeline opponents formed a ring around the White House to protest the pipeline. The Australian Senate has approved a landmark law to force the country's 500 worst polluting companies to pay a tax on their carbon emissions. Australia is the highest emitter per capita in the industrial world due to a heavy reliance on coal to generate electricity. Australia's Prime Minister Julia Gillard supported the measure, and the minister said, "Today Australia has a price on carbon as the law of our land. This comes after a quarter of a century of scientific warnings, 37 parliamentary inquiries, and years of bitter debate and division. Today our nation has got this done. It has taken the most effective step it can to cut carbon pollution." And former President Jimmy Carter is visiting Haiti as part of an effort to buy Habit for Humanity to build homes for homeless following last year's devastating earthquake. Speaking to reporters, Carter expressed disappointment that reconstruction efforts have been so slow. And the former president said, "I've only been here one day, and I've seen and we've driven through Port-au-Prince and through part of a large city. I don't see any evidence of building homes for poor families. I see a lot of reconstruction of very large houses, you know, where rich people live. Well, my understanding is that the pledges of funding have been quite large, but the actual delivery of money and the spending of monies for homes has been very slow, and I'll be sharing this opinion with the United States officials and United Nations officials when I return to the United States." The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals has granted a stay of execution to Hank Skinner, who was scheduled to be executed on Wednesday. Skinner was convicted of the 1993 deaths of his girlfriend and her 2 sons in Pampa, Texas. Questions have arisen over his guilt because multiple items from the crime scene have not been tested for DNA. And a breaking story today, Michael Jackson's personal doctor, Conrad Murray, has been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for giving a singer a fatal dose of powerful anesthetic propofol. The drug normally used in surgery was ruled the main cause of Jackson's death at the age of 50. And that's it for World News today. Now another thanks to one of our underwriters who supports your only visual video news media in Nevada County. You guessed it, it's us, GVTV News.
Soundcheck Music Center, the rock and roll connection. We have guitars, amps, drum equipment, sound accessories, lessons, and repairs. We are located at 671 Maltman Drive, Grass Valley. 530-272-7236, open 7 days a week.
Something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware.
That's right, it's time for the police blotter and pictures in the blotter, not from these actual events, but used for visual aid only. Grass Valley Police Department on Sunday. At 2:26 p.m., a woman from 200 block of South Auburn Street reported an attempted burglary with a key left partially stuck in a keyhole. At 2:49 p.m., caller from 100 block of Maryland Drive reported being assaulted by a man. And 5:13 p.m., a caller from East Main Street reported a physical fight involving 2 men. A man was arrested on suspicion of being drunk in public. A woman was arrested on suspicion of battery and being drunk in public. 6:05 p.m., a woman from 300 block of Railroad Avenue reported being locked behind a gate. And 6:46 p.m., a caller from Freeman Lane reported a woman fell down, was crawling around and saying the ground was talking to her before getting in a vehicle and driving away. 7:44 p.m., caller from business on Sutton Way reported a man raiding ashtrays and harassing customers for marijuana roaches or joints. 10:52 p.m., a woman from 300 block of Pleasant Street reported a man tried to hit her. And Nevada County Sheriff's Office on Sunday. 11:42 a.m., caller from 11,000 block of Spencerville Road reported finding a large amount of Nevada Union High School track uniforms and gear. At 12:17 p.m., a caller from 10,000 block of Hawk Lane reported a man refusing to leave was advised he would be arrested for trespassing if he returned. At 12:40 p.m., caller from 15,000 block Dog Bar Road reported hearing 6 gunshots. At 3:23 p.m., a woman from Oxnard Court reported a drunken woman causing a disturbance. She was arrested on suspicion of battery. At 3:59 p.m., caller from Lava Rock Avenue reported a runaway who returned later. At 7:46 p.m., a caller reported the juvenile was saying his father assaulted him. At 5:18 p.m., caller from 21,000 block of Higgins Road reported 2 large pigs running through the parking lot and hanging out in a field. They returned to their home. At Monday, 6:49 a.m., caller from Pine Hill Drive reported a boy causing a disturbance and refusing to go to school. He was throwing items. He then went to school. Nevada City Police Department on Sunday, 8:49 a.m., caller from 300 block of Sacramento Street reported a man in a leopard coat who had been in the bathroom for an hour. He agreed to move on. On Monday, 6:30 a.m., a woman from Broad Street called to report people were taking her cell phone and wallet and staring at her. She then said it might have been a drape in her house and she would contact her physician. And that's it for the Police Blotter today. Now another thanks to one of our underwriters who supports your only visual video news media in Nevada County. Yeah, that's right. It's us. GVTV News. In today's local news headlines, Grass Valley Police talks at impasse. Council to consider imposing cuts. And community gathered geared to end corporate power. And state budget trigger could affect child services. And our first local story written by Trina Kleist out of the Union. Months of labor negotiations between Grass Valley Police managers and the city have ended in impasse after officers rejected the city's latest offer. Negotiations involved the unit representing leaders of the city's police force, the sergeants and the captains. It's the city's smallest bargaining unit, 5 people. City council members are expected to consider whether to impose a contract on them. The meeting was, well, last night, 7 p.m., including public hearing on the matter down at 125 East Main Street, downtown. The city's last, best, and final offer could be imposed, essentially cuts officers' pay to raising their contributions toward the public employee retirement system from 0 to 3% and raising their contribution towards health insurance premiums from 7% to 15%. In their previous contract, police managers had agreed to increase payments to their health insurance premiums from 0 to 7%, City Administrator Dan Holler had said. Other city employee groups have made similar concessions and also have agreed to the equivalent of a 2% pay cut. We understand the economic conditions are tough and everyone's cutting back, said Sergeant Steve Johnson, speaking for the unit. Not here, this is Captain Rex Marks. But budget cuts and staff reductions mean officers work with a skeleton crew that can only barely meet the minimum of patrol duties, Johnson added. Patrols have been reduced from 4 people to 3, and the duties of one sergeant whose position is now vacant have been distributed to others, Police Chief John Foster said. Johnson came into the force in 1995 when the city's limits stopped at Dorsey Drive. Annexation and growth have added the city's population and extent, but the department has been cut to nearly the size it was 18 years ago, Johnson added. We've struggled to attract qualified candidates with the contract that we do have, Johnson said. Deeper concessions could mean we would have to lower our standards, and that's not acceptable. If imposed, the contract would be in place through June 2012, and negotiations would start again next spring, Haller added. Officers in the department's larger unit, representing about 20 patrol officers, dispatchers, and other support staff, are watching the situation in advance of their own contract expiring next year. They have said. A handful already are applying for jobs elsewhere, Johnson said. In our immediate area, we're a little bit behind in the base salary figure, Haller said, but police forces in other cities are working under similar benefit conditions. They understand we have an impasse, have to impose a contract. We have to close the gap. At Tuesday's meeting, council members also will be briefed on status of lawsuit against the Nevada County Airport Land Use Commission regarding an airport safety plan. Officials say conflicts with city zoning policies. And a coalition of local groups is hosting a community gathering geared to end corporate power in coordination with more than 200 similar events that will take place nationwide Wednesday, November 9th. The purpose of the event is to build momentum to the constitutional amendment to abolish corporate personhood and overturn the 2010 Supreme Court decision Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, which lets unlimited corporate funds flood our election system. The local gathering will be held at the Unitarian Universalist Community of the Mountains at 246 Church Street in Grass Valley. The event will feature a national conference call with Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a short film called The Story of Citizens United versus the FEC, songs and stories from local people returning from Occupy Wall Street in New York. Time for refreshments and informal conversation and discussions about organizing a local action to take place on 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court decision, January 21st, 2012. Local gathering is being sponsored by the Social Action Committee of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Mountains, the Peace Center of Nevada County, Healthcare for All, California Nevada County Earth Justice Ministries, and other local groups, as well as national groups including Public Citizens, People for American Way, and Move to Amend. For more information about the local gathering, it can be found at ncpeace.org. Background information about Citizens United and call for constitutional amendment can be found at democracyisforpeople.org or at pfaw.org/governmentbythepeople. And in a story by Christopher Rosacker out of the Union, if California's budget isn't on track by mid-December, as many as 20 families dependent on Sierra Nevada Children's Services could suddenly find themselves without help in child care. In December, state finance officials will determine whether California is on the path to secure $4 billion more in revenue. Otherwise, the budget requires a trigger of $2.5 billion in cuts to be made to education, public safety, and social services. Sierra Nevada Children's Services falls into the tier facing a $23 million cut, said William Enoch, the organization's deputy director. With an annual budget of more than $3 million, Sierra Nevada Children's Service is the third largest employer in Nevada County, said Dennis Fournier, the organization's executive director. Although it serves a number of functions, Sierra Nevada Children's Service's primary role is as a conduit, connecting families in need of child care options, explained Dick Law, the president of the organization's board of directors. Caseworkers work with families based on their needs and budgets to help find caregivers, Law added. Additionally, the organization will subsidize that care if necessary. Sierra Nevada Children's Services offer assistance through direct financial support, referrals and resources, access to educational workshops, and other technical assistance, as well as maintaining a resource library. In 2010, Sierra Nevada Children's Services provided technical assistance to 2,074 parents, relatives, grandparents, licensed family care home providers, child care providers, and non-licensed providers. In that year, 1,020 children directly benefited from financial support of the organization. Some people have this misconception that it is just a welfare program, but it's not, said Law. It allows people to go to work and work their way into a better life. Some people work their way right out of subsidy. However, if state budget trigger is pulled, an estimated 15 to 20 families at the top of the qualification spectrum could face disenrollment. Almost 30 families already have, thanks to the budget reductions, Enoch said. Overall, the looming trigger cuts could represent as much as 4% of Sierra Nevada's Children's Services total budget. It's easy to talk about these numbers, but when you see the faces, it's really painful, Enoch said. The stories of parents that are going to have to leave their jobs and find some other solution are really painful. In 2010, the average monthly child care cost per child in California ranged from $660 to $965 for infants, $598 to $823 for 4-year-olds, and up to $437 for school-age children, making California the 5th least affordable state to center-based child care. Population as a whole doesn't seem to understand the importance of early child development. It prepares the child for life. It really is critical to the future of the country, Fournier added. Anticipating further reductions, Fournier is already seeking alternative funding options. We have never really gone out of donations before. We do get them, but we've never had a strong donation base. It's something we are going to have to look at in the future. Fournier also hopes to increase the size of the current board of directors from 5 seats to anywhere between 7 and 9 members who could help connect an organization with sympathetic businesses and other institutions. And that's it today for our local news. GVTV News would like to thank Associated Press, Reuters, Amy Goodman, the Union, and others for the sourcing of the news, and you for watching. Don't forget, we broadcast 3 times a day in public access, NCTV, Comcast Cable Channel 11, Sudden Link Channel 16, and Trucking Alta Sierra. Talk to you tomorrow. It should be Wednesday.